But one of the things that really disturbed me was when this report came out, I was absolutely shocked to see that a coal plant literally in my backyard was on this list of failing coal plants. And we scored a D-. So even though it says in this report that in most cases, not all cases, coal plants are usually located in our communities, in minority, low-income communities. And our report says that they tend to be, not that they're always located. And in this particular case, that's not true with Plant Jack Robinson. So we're not making that claim. And that was one of the first things that when we spoke with the power company representatives, that they wanted to tell us, well, 70% of people live out there, or fighting. Well, like President Story told them, we don't care if they're polka dot. We are concerned about our environment and not just the 3-mile radius. We looked at the report, but we're concerned about anybody within a 30-mile radius of that plant. So that's fact number one, because I know that, this company is going to come up and try to challenge us, that they already have, in saying that, the report says that all of the coal plants are located. So that's not true. Another myth or fable that is not true that they're going to argue is that we are trying to close Plant Jack Robinson. So let me be very clear. The NAACP has a 104-year record of trying to get jobs. We're not in the business of trying to have people to lose their jobs. But I do not want people to think that you have to make a choice between a living wage and your health. And what good is making a living wage if it's going to kill you and kill the people surrounding you? So we are not in any way, we have a 104-year proven record. I think it's been in the last 4 weeks. Please do not, because this happens in everywhere we go. I'm the national chairman of the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. And everywhere we go, it's the same argument from the power company when they try to discredit this report. So, I cannot stress enough to you that what we want is we want to breathe clean air. We have a right to breathe clean air. And we have a right to ask questions about the regulations in the clean air. One of the things that I'm really disappointed about was that I sent an email to Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality asking if they would send me where can I find online records or get access to electronic records. I'd like to see all the information on Plant Jack Robinson. I was told, and I've been irate ever since, that I would have to drive to Jackson, file through the Freedom of Information Act, take a 6-hour round trip drive to Jackson, drive 360 miles in order to find out about the air that I'm breathing. And I think that is one of the most disappointing and telling things about an agency that is supposed to be regulating this industry. How many of you get in your water bill? I just got one in my last water bill. A statement periodically telling you that, something happened with your water. There was some type of bacteria or some type of contaminant in your water. Well, I know it's after the fact, but at least even after the fact. I appreciate knowing, even if it's after the fact. I'd like to know during it happened, but I'd certainly like you mentioned about DuPont, they let us know as a good neighbor when we have this. And I'm not really sure, Representative Barnes, I copied her on an email because I'm not really sure. I can't conceive of having to go because it is not economically or environmentally responsible to have to drive to Jackson to get access to and copy records. But, not in this day and age. just think, you know, we're always at the bottom of every list in this state. And here again, one more place that we're at the bottom of the list. And to me, it's unconscionable. It's inexcusable that we would have to drive to Jackson and to view some reports. And then, from my understanding, have to pay to have copies made of it. So, you know, in the process of even burning gas, we're killing more trees. And this is from our Department of Environmental Quality. And what we're asking people to do is to hold everyone accountable. We need to hold ourselves accountable. We need to hold our industries accountable. We need to hold our state governments accountable. Inside your folder, we're going to get into a lot of detail on this later. The next step, this is just the beginning of the process because I really wanted the ministers here, I wanted community officials here, so that we can really make sure that we have a turnout on October 15th at the Good Deeds Community Center. We have invited people. Jackie will be back down from Baltimore. I'm not sure what the status of our people from EPA, from the regional, would be since, you know, we have the government shutdown. But we did have 2 people who were going to be here from Atlanta. Inside your folder, well, and what I only have about 8 or 9 copies of this whole blood report. We'll try and get some more later, but I'd like to give them out, I guess, out to the pastors who want them first, and then we'll get some more out later. We did have a full day training workshop on this, I think back in April. So you can also find this document online. So if you sign in, I will certainly send you the link. If you put your email address down, I will send you the link to where you can find this information online in our cold blood report. Because Plant Watson is for a D- in the report. Now, to give you a little background on this report, we have another energy company that denied profusely. I mean, they challenged the report. Well, I don't know. It seems like they would go back and forth. They really couldn't challenge it, but then they tried to, and then they said they had done a lot of things, you know, and made a lot of improvements and everything. And so we waited until the next report came out. And the next report had them even higher on the list. It was even worse. They were like number 1 and 3 or 1 and 4 on the list. And then when this came out, then they were number 1 and 2. So we had a mayor, Mayor Ron Emanuel of Chicago, who made a demand to them to clean up those coal plants or close them down. And they closed them down. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard anything about Chicago being without lights. And that was last year. But they hadn't spent one day without any lights. And you hadn't heard anything about what that did to the economy in Chicago. So those are usually the arguments that you hear. But, you know, by closing those were the worst 2 offending coal plants. What we are asking for is a conversion to the cleanest form of energy possible. And that would be renewable energy. Now, I know that the power company are already saying that they're going to convert to natural gas. Well, now that term is a misnomer, natural gas, because anything that's natural you think is safe. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term fracking and what fracking is. That's a big concern. So we don't want to ask to trade out one people for another people in our environment. And I'd like for us to be on the same page and understand that we are asking for a conversion to the cleanest form of energy possible, which is natural gas. And you're going to have some big pushback on that also, because they're going to say it's not going to work in this area. And I just think as a community, we need to stand together, stand united. We all breathe the same air. And I think it's very important, if we don't do it for ourselves, do it for the generations to come. And that's all I'm going to say. I'll just let anybody who has questions answer, because the other people will not be here until 2 o'clock. Excuse me. Okay.
I'll try to
send some information on how they came up, how they quantified this study. So I'm not really sure, Jackie, are you sure why? Was there a reason council was not on here?
No, I think probably, no, I actually, I don't know.
That's a good question, though.
My reason for asking that is 2 months ago, I was invited by a group called Sea Change. It's an organization that coordinates care for cancer patients throughout the country. And at that meeting, discovered that the Mississippi Gulf Coast has the 3rd highest rate of cancer in the country. We might be able to bottom of a lot of things, but that's not an issue on the top of it. It's a pretty good job. I guess not to make it concern is even the other night when you get the same room with representatives from DEQ, is that it would seem as if though both our State Department of Health as well as our State Department of dealing with our water, it would seem that both of those agencies would be on top of that, or at least we would hear something about it, and that's not a very well-known fact at all by South Mississippians. And it would certainly seem that it might be something they're trying to hide, not even on the field.
What Reverend Madoff said, that's called, they're burning coal, right? That's the carcinogen that smoke is coming out. It doesn't carcinogen cause cancer.
Yes. Yeah. But I don't know, but I will say this now, we can contact them. They are supposed to meet via Skype on the 15th, and we can pose this question to them ahead of time so that they can answer that when they make their presentation by Skype. We're also going to have a presentation from someone from the American Lung Association out of St. Louis, Missouri, and because the American Lung Association scored, Jack Watson scored an F on their report card for the days of hot ozone. So, it's really alarming that we can hear all of these reports, but then we only hear glowing accolades from Mississippi Power Company and DEQ in saying, that they are, well, what they say is that they are within the regulations and guidelines. If that's the case, that is why I asked the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality here, because we need to know what our standards and guidelines are. If we've got a very low threshold or a very low bar, then I think we need to look at making sure that we have something in place that would be comparable to other areas. Because what I did, I researched, and I know even in the state of Alabama, you can go online and you can check anything that you want to check about coal plants out there. And I simply cannot understand why we're not able to do that in this state.
It would just seem to me that there's no alarm being sounded
No.
to this issue at all.
Yes.
To be the highest rate in the country, and neither our State Department of Health nor DEQ are concerned about that?
Well, that's why this actually, Pastor, is the alarm bell that the community, is sounding and asking them and holding them accountable. We have asked on the 15th for the Mississippi State Department of Health to be here. Our state epidemiologist will be here. And there will be, from 5 to 6, there will be an information hour.
5 to 6 weeks?
5 to 6 on the 15th. It will be an information hour. The town hall meeting will be from 6 to 8. But from 5 to 6, we will have someone from the Gulfport City Water Department. We'll have someone from the Mississippi State Department of Epidemiology. We will have someone from Mississippi Power Company. We will have someone from DEQ. But what we'll have will be tables set up so that you can go around and get information on, get information on our water supply, get pertinent information on the asthma, and we can ask the Department of Epidemiology if they could send someone in the Department of Health to deal with the, cancer part of this. I think that's a good question, a very good question.
I mean, for both of these agencies to have the 3rd highest rate of cancer under their umbrella and no alarm, nothing, and keep us blind to, Wow.
I agree.
Hey, I have a comment. I went to a farm in New Orleans, and it was brought out that the physicians, and that's where it's coming from, do not know how to diagnose, don't have the necessary funding to diagnose these cancers, not only from the coal plant, but from the BP oil spill. And that's what they're asking us to get behind, is to get our physicians trained to know when these symptoms come up, where they're coming from, and not just randomly assign them to some other agency or cause from.
I want to fix it for you.
Yeah. But the physicians got to be trained.
It's not just the Gulf Coast. Common Health Action held a small session down here, and they said it is also in the northern part of the state that the cancer is rampant, but they do not have the medical facilities that they would need to carry on a program up in the Delta areas, so they want to come down on the Gulf Coast and see can they not work that program here. So it's more than just us. Mississippi is just widespread cancer all over our state.
And after being on the bottom of everything else, this is not one you want to be on top of.
And I think we did invite Common Cause. They will be here also, actually. I forgot about that. They will be at the information hour.
Sea change or just another one?
Well, this is Common Health Action, which is, I guess it's a national organization. And there is a branch in Jackson, so we're hopeful they will be here.
Any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to throw out one while he was talking about what was happening on the Gulf Coast. Picayune, Mississippi was at one time the top of all of this because of the creosote plants. That creosote and those tongue nut plants, everybody it wasn't a family in Picayune that hadn't been touched by cancer. And they knew where it was coming from. I don't eat greens or anything grown from the soil right now from Picayune. And you know how we eat greens. And I have a sister still there. But that soil is just grossly contaminated. From creosote, that was the creosote area. And the tongue nuts, they don't have them anymore. You find a few scattered plants. I'm sure you're familiar with it, Reverend Black. But it just killed the soil.
We have an issue here. I for a very long time, well, I guess I back up to tell a little bit of the story. I grew up in Texas, where I was told as a child that we were Democrats because we were poor. Well, I moved to Mississippi. And of course, I was warned that when I left Texas that Mississippi was awfully poor. And I got to Mississippi and found Negroes staying about like they stay everywhere. Some of us have, some of us don't, some of us want to have, and some of us don't. But I found most white folk from the LC for my life. And yet, they call themselves Republicans. And so it put me on this path of wondering what in the world could we ever do to get Bubba, that's the poor white boy, and Jamal, that's the poor brother. And what can we do to get them back together at the voting box? This might be such an issue because these the incidence of cancer in Mississippi is not just a black issue; it's a Mississippi issue. And I'm also concerned with the fact that is that so because there is so much poverty and ignorance. And what can we do? What can the NAACP do to reach beyond just the black issue to make sure that it's known that this is a common issue for Mississippi?
Well, really, it's not just a black issue.
It's not at all.
Not at all, because if you realize, if you live where I live and where Kathy lives, and you look at the distance between us and Plant Jack Watson, there are 4 predominantly very, very expensive white suburban developments out there. So it's not just us. In fact, they get the brunt before we do, because you got one of those three over there.
I don't know the name of any of those Brentwood.
Well, Brentwood is on this side, but there are three on the east side, or the west side. Three on the west side that are the most expensive homes, probably some of the most expensive homes in Gulfport, and they're all white. So they're getting they're getting more than most of us are getting of the whatever's coming out of Plant Jack Watson. So it ought to be of importance to them of what is happening. And it's the cancer, because if I remember, I worked with somebody who lived out there, and she had 2 or 3 people in her family at that time that had cancer. And so they're right there at Plant Jack Watson. So it should not be a white or a black issue.
I guess since attending that meeting, I just wondered, why is South Mississippi ignorant of that? I mean, why isn't that something we know about? The TV stations, the newspaper. Why are we kept in the dark about that issue?
Well, but I think those are questions that we need to ask. I think that we need to voice those concerns.
Again, both these two, both State Department of Health and DEQ, both
Yes.
ought to be alarmed by the fact that happens in Mississippi under their umbrellas.
Well, we do have a pretty intense agenda for the 15th. And like I said, we will have people from the health department as well as DEQ. We have invited DEQ back for that town hall meeting. But we wanted to have a smaller meeting to ask those questions.
If I don't get a chance to get back to Ms. Trudy Fisher for later on, is somebody going to ask her that question?
We'll ask. Richard and Rose, you know.
I think, and Rev. Madoff asked why, we have been bringing this to the forefront for a very long time, Rose Johnson, myself, about Jeff Watson Plant. It started pretty much before Campbell County. And for some reason, DEQ, EPA, they don't want to listen. They have to listen. So we brought this concern to them.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that MDEQ, Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, as well as EPA, has not protected the people and the health of the people. It is about profit over people. Most of our governors are pro-industry. It's about letting them do whatever they want so that the industries can make a big profit. That's basically what it is. MDEQ works at the pleasure of the governor. Most of these positions are appointed by the governor. Somebody he knows is going to make sure whatever the permit department is, those people work at the pleasure of the governor. It's very hard that you will ever find a permit that's denied in the state of Mississippi if industry wants to come in, like Campbell County, Mississippi Power, any powerful people. They're going to get what they want because Haley Barbour is one of the biggest lobbyists in the United States. He's a very, very powerful person. He has the pull, he has the clout, he has the political connection, he has the influence. And when he tells the permit department, I want this permit to go through, I want this industry to have it, that's what it's going to be. And it's about profit over the people. It's just that simple.
Let me say that in that meeting with Mississippi Power Company, the representative was so smug about the fact that MDEQ would have allowed them to build anything they wanted to build.
And they will.
When they planned to build. I mean, and let me say one other thing that they said, because they have been out in the community trying to do some things, you know. Yay, they know we're here. And it's taken them all of this time to recognize the fact and to recognize our communities. So this project share, you know, they're now saying, you know, letting us know about project share and you know, really tooting their horn on project share and this $150,000 that they're putting towards it. And then I think they said something about some matching funds. You know, forgive me if I'm not impressed, because they spend $13 million a year on lobbying. And I'm not going to jump up and down and shout because they're giving $150,000 to help people pay the light bill, especially one that's gone up because they're building the Kemper County plant. I'm not going to get excited because they're going around door to door and they're giving people up to $500 worth of insulation. Because, you know, I mean, when you compare that to the $13 million, that was the only thing that they didn't dispute in the report when we met with them, is the amount of money that they're spending on lobbying. So those are really pennies compared to the amount of money that they spend not to do the right thing in our community. And, you know, I guess one of the things, because again, this happens all over. As soon as we come up, as soon as they're challenged, any of these energy companies are challenged, they start doing things in the community. We had this one energy company who boasted about this playground that they built. Well, luckily here, Jackie is keen on everything, and she knew that grass couldn't even grow on the playground because the soil was so contaminated. So, I mean, to say you're doing something good, but at the same time, you know, you're not really taking care of what needs to be taken care of, or what needs to be done to actually protect us, and you're out doing some window dressing things. I just don't want us, and that's why I say I know that that's going to be a way to try to split us and divide us as a community, is to accuse the NAACP of trying to close down Plant Jack Blossom and put people out of the job. So I just want to ask everybody in this room to please be mindful that that is simply not true, and that really and truly, you know, when you add it up, now maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but I don't see $150,000 a year to help assist people with their energy. And I think that all 23 counties in Ypsilanti County, 23 county service area. And not only that, I wish I could show you a copy of the form that you have to fill out to get that. You can only get up to $150 twice a year. And the form that they fill out is more intrusive than if you go in and get food stamps. It's really, they ask for an awful lot of information, and a lot of people are not willing to give out that type of information for $150.
You know, if I was the NAACP, I wouldn't worry about Mississippi Power saying that NAACP is trying to shut them down, because the EPA has set high mercury emission standards that Mississippi Power must meet that mercury standard by April 16, 2015. They will either switch over to natural gas or shut it down. It's just that simple. And I doubt if they will shut it down because they own that plant Austin. So in 2015, they cannot put the pollution controls on the scrubbers because they're landlocked. It takes a lot of land to build those, to put the pollution controls on. They're going to shut it down or switch over to natural gas by 2015. So I would worry about that.
Well, I'm not worried about it. I just want everybody here to know, before it gets out, because, I know this is the scenario. This is big corporations, what big corporations do. Now they're going to out here show we're the good guys. We're out here trying to have these job fairs, and we're out here trying to do all of this stuff in the community, and all of y'all are trying to do is keep people out of the job. I've seen them do it to the Sierra Club, and say that they are paid, and that's what they usually do. And I always say, I testified at the EPA here in Chicago last year, and what they always say is that we're, environmentalists are hired hands out to kill a job market. And we're out to try to stop them from killing people, not to try to kill jobs. So you can have both. And I am glad you mentioned about the new EPA standards. That was one thing. I just wanted to shout when I attended President Obama's second inauguration, when he has made the environment, that's like his they have a platform this year. The several laws are getting tougher, but I think what we need to do is hold our state people accountable. We need to know what's going on here. We need to know what our standards are, because right now, there isn't much uniformity. You know, I mean, you have your federal guidelines, but you don't have as much uniformity. I don't know if that's one of the things. Jack has been being on Capitol Hill, inside the Beltway, on all of this. So, are they looking at maybe having the more uniform standards within the states also?
They are. They're trying to.
Good. Okay. Because we're not going to our state isn't going to comply anything but the minimum.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to, that's where we as citizens and taxpayers, you know, should come in and demand accountability from our state agencies.
Are there any studies that show how they affect children and education, or the kids who are just born, infants, and are there any birth defects?
Right.
Has that been charted? Since it causes such terrible diseases, it seems to me like it should start in the womb first and then affect the children and teenagers' performance in school.
Well, that's something we can look into.
Actually, that's something we already done.
Oh, really? Okay, all right. She's gonna make her presentation at 2, and so that way I think you get a lot more information, you know, at that time. And like I said, just as a community, I wanted us to know, and you know, us to be as cohesive as possible in our knowledge. And because the representative from the DEQ has already arrived, and you know, we're going to try and keep this, you know, within the time frame that we have here, so that we won't, you know, take anyone's time too much. But if I have everybody's email address, I think it's very important for us to get just as many people out as possible on October 15th over at the these communities.
What time?
It's from 6 to 8. If you look inside your folder, there is there's a flyer inside here. Okay, well, we got to get our PowerPoint presentation set up also.
Opportunity to come out tonight with us today. Thank you for making this possible. We appreciate you being here, and this is a learning session for each and every one of us, and I'm learning, and I hope you are too. So let's begin.
Good afternoon. Oh, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Didn't realize this microphone has so much power. I want to first thank NAACP for providing this opportunity for the leaders in our community. I also want to thank Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality for coming out to give us information and listen to our concerns. I appreciate all of you for being here today, and hopefully we all will gather something that we can take back to our community, to our families, and for those ministers that are here to your congregations. Thank you. And now we're going to have a roundtable introduction, and I don't know if we need to pass the microphone around. Okay. All right.
Hey, good evening. Thank you for having us down today. My name is Richard Harrell. I'm the Office Director for Pollution Control at DEQ. So most things when you think of pollution, air pollution, water pollution, solid waste issues, almost all those things are in my purview for Executive Director of Transportation. She sends her developers to kind of have a split series lately. There's so many things going on. She will be at the town meeting, but not come down today. Okay.
I'm Jackie Patterson. I'm the Environmental Justice Director for the NAACP. I'm based in Washington, Baltimore, Maryland. Thanks.
Ruth Story, President of the NAACP branch.
I'm Rose Johnson, past chair of the Mississippi State Sierra Club, and founder of the North Gulf Board Committee, Joanne Trust.
Jamie McIntyre, Director, Center for Environmental and Economic Justice.
I'm Myra Dow. I'm Chief of the Ed Division, Mississippi DEQ. Melissa Collier, Director of Office of Community Engagement in DEQ.
Hi, I'm Deanna Rush. I'm a permit writer in DEQ.
I'm John Nelson, Vice President of City Development.
Richard Marsh, Chairman of the Gulfport Concerned Citizen Coalition, and member of the North Gulf Civic Club.
Michael Leach, pastor of Maranatha City Baptist Church in Gulfport.
Dr. Joey K. Barnes, pastor of Gethsemane Christian Center, Gulfport.
Mayor Ram Wilson, North Gulfport Civic Club.
Good afternoon. My name is Shona Stallings. I'm an attorney at law. I'm also a member of the NAACP and chair of the political PAC chair. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Arthur Barbara Hawkins, I'm the NAACP member.
Christine White, Election Commissioner for District 4.
Brenda Matthews, President of West Gulfport Civic Club.
Philip Heidelberg, Minister at St. Mark and Raleigh Chapel, United Methodist Church.
Howard Page, a community organizer with the Steps Coalition.
Sonia Williams Barnes, State Representative for District 19.
Francis Frederick, President of the Gulfport Civic Club, former state.
The gentleman in the back, introduce themselves.
Carol Span, Pastor New Jerusalem Missionary Baptist Church.
Lucia Taylor, Pastor Full Gospel Church.
Amos Marshall, Pastor Trinity Full Gospel Baptist Church.
Carol Henderson, attorney, Gulfport NAACP member.
Pamela Spagner, member of the NAACP. Maddie Jordan, NAACP.
Gary Furton, NAACP.
Over there.
Vernon Main.
Okay.
Wayne Farrell, 7 Vice, Gulfport NAACP.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate everyone being here. A special welcome to our representative from MDEQ, all out of Jackson, I assume, and also a special thank you for Jackie Patterson, who flew down from Baltimore, Maryland, and a very, very, very special thank you to all the ministers here. Anytime I know we have the support of the ministers in our community, I feel like we're in good hands. So a very special thank you to all of you. The next thing on the agenda is the meeting purpose and overview. And I had mentioned earlier, I am the national chairman of the National Board of Directors, Environmental and Climate Justice Committee of the NAACP. I'm also the local chairman for the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee for the Gulfport branch. And as national chairman, this is the committee that has oversight over our Environmental and Climate Justice Department. Excuse me. I'm a resident, have been a resident of Gulfport for almost 40 years now. And I live at my same location, the house I'm in now, since 1979. And that is about 3 miles from Glen Jack Watson. And, I try to be, I always thought I was extremely environmentally conscious. And I did not know until this cold weather report came out that I'm living, very close to a failing coal plant. And the NAACP scored Jack Watson a D- behind us, and its report card on failing coal plants. And then I was alarmed, even more alarmed, when I saw the report from the study that was commissioned by the Clean Air Task Force, which, if you look inside your folder, it gives you a breakdown on how many deaths in emergency room with health stats that are attributed to St. Watson. In addition to that, we have the American Lung Association who scores Harrison County and F. And my first question was, and I think everybody, and we had this question asked today also, is why didn't we know? And, you know, I don't feel like I should have to, as a resident, taxpaying resident of Mississippi. And if there's a problem with a coal plant in my backyard, I think not only should I know about it, but every resident of this county in this area. I don't know of the other reports. You know, I mean, I did ask of the methodology behind the Clean Air Task Force. We have invited them to really make a presentation at the October 15th meeting. And I truly hope, because I really appreciate you coming, but I do want to express my utter disappointment that the director of the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality did not come. Both these meetings were scheduled around her schedule. I would not schedule Jackie until we got her schedule. So, you know, please take this message back, and I am extremely disappointed. We have never called on this agency before. And I really think it is a slap in the face of the taxpaying citizens who pay salaries of this executive director for her not to show up to that. So, that said, I do want the rest of the meeting. I couldn't go any further because I was really disappointed in that not happening, because we've not asked for anything from MDEQ. I mean, we have a right to those taxpaying citizens. So it is really a big disappointment. We would like for nothing to come up on the 15th. We would appreciate it. Okay? So anyway, as I was saying, I'm sorry I kind of got sidetracked there because I was looking for it and then she didn't come. But anyway, this is very important to us, and we do have a lot of concerns about this, because I don't know, and I'm not saying that all of these reports are accurate. I believe the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I don't believe that the plant is as clean as they're telling us it is. But I don't have any way to know unless we get, I had to laugh when I met Melissa, because I said, oh, you still have your head on. Because I kind of bit her head off in the email. And I thought about it and had to write back and say, I know that, you know, I didn't mean to shoot the messenger, but she's the one who broke the bad news to me that I would have to make a 6-hour round trip, 360-mile drive round trip to get some information. What embarrassed me most is even you can go online in Alabama and find out about their coal plant. Anytime you let Alabama outdo you, I don't even know. I mean, it's embarrassing, number one. You know, I always try to take up for my state, but, you know, that was just embarrassing. And to me, embarrassing coming from an agency who should be trying to, you know, be more economically and environmentally friendly, that we have to come and have copies made and pay for copies to be made. And I did talk to the former representative and the current representative. We did have a brief conversation about that. So it really would be great, you know, if we could have online access. We'd like to have information. You know, we'd like to be notified. If there's any type of release, we know DuPont notifies us, and I'm assuming, and that's one of the questions I'd like to ask, that we don't, you know, if there's some type of tax release, you know, or are we notified? What as taxpayers, you know, we know when we get our water bill, they will give us a breakdown. They'll tell us, even if it's after the fact. I mean, we like to know immediately when it happens, but even if it's after the fact, I think we have a right to know. We have a right to this information. And Freedom of Information Act, that's what it should mean, freedom to have this information, not freedom to restrict it, because that's a very restricted process. To me, that something should be so.
What prevents us from doing that now?
Okay.
So that our current legislator can take that up in coming session.
Currently, the Office of Community Engagement is me and two contractors. And so the funding for my office is limited. And so therefore, I really don't have the funds to hire somebody to come in and actually scan all the files that compose the file for the Jack Watson plan. And so that has been the limit. Now, the frustration that you shared with me in the email is frustrations that I've had from other communities. And if you go to the webpage for Office of Community Engagement, you'll see where there are other files that have been put out there online. And so I'm working on it. I just have not had enough people nor money to get it all done.
So that our current legislator will know when she goes to Jackson and Denver, the only limitation you have is funds.
And people.
That's our primary challenge. So we started the document imaging process back in about 2008, trying to get everything online. Since that time, our general fund appropriations cut 48%. That's pretty steep. You were there, didn't you? But I mean, so we are challenged. We are trying to get much information. But just to give you an example like that, I went and looked at plans, watching the files. They pretty much line them up, stack them. They would reach to me the burning down there. So that's just one position. And that's a lot of information to get in there. What we're striving for now is to at least have the current information. We've got a lot of current information we believe available at times. What we don't have is a lot of historical information. I won't sit here and make a lot of excuses. We're going to do better. We're striving to do better. We're challenging what we're dealing with. What we do have out there is, like I said, a lot of current information, current permits. Some of those type of things are available. Anytime we have a public hearing, we have public notices, all those are sent out, available online, that type of thing. We're going to social media now. We have Facebook, Twitter accounts, so trying to spread it that way to people as well. Reach a lot of younger generation as well. That's pretty much the only way they do communicate these days. So we realize we've got some challenges before us. Like Ray was trying to do better, trying to get there. We try to honor specific requests like this, knowing I think we've gotten most information requested. It's not readily available online. I apologize for that, but we try to honor those requests, realize the problem, I know the problem, the efficient method, the most efficient method for us and you is if it's all out there online and you don't have to come through us, basically you go get it yourself. I mean, that's what we're striving for.
And I know you said shortage of money and people. If you had the money, the people will come. Okay, all right. Okay, we're going to go ahead and let Jackie make her presentation, and then we'll hear from Rose.
Okay, so I am going to, NAACP did a report and released in November of 2012, and we were looking at coal-fired power plants throughout the country. We looked at 378 coal-fired power plants nationwide, and we ranked them based on their emissions of, we ranked them first based on how many people are being exposed to the emissions from the coal plant. And so we looked at population density surrounding the plant. We looked at the percentage of the people surrounding the plant who are people of color, and the percentage of folks who are surrounding the plant who are low income. And then we also looked at the level of sulfur dioxide emissions and nitrogen oxide emissions. And based on those 5 factors, we ranked 370 plants throughout the country. And as Kathy said, we ended up ranking the Jack Watson plants having a grade of D- based on those factors because of the population surrounding the plant and because of the emissions coming from the plant. And I'll give you those exact figures in my presentation. So in the presentation, I will be talking about, I'll be talking a little bit about why the NAACP is involved in this in the first place, in terms of why we were interested in working on coal-fired power plants, what the issue was there. And then I'll talk a little bit about the findings specifically about Jack Watson. And then talk about really what our vision is for a transition from coal-based energy production, because we don't want to just talk about what we don't want, we also want to talk about what we do want and what's possible. So again, we'll talk, so the impact of coal, focus on Jack Watson, putting faces on the consequences of our addiction to coal, because unfortunately the faces do end up being predominantly communities of color and low-income communities who don't have this, who are disproportionately vulnerable to the impacts of pollution, and therefore this is why the NAACP with our human and civil rights agenda really cared about this issue. So this is just an overview of the presentation. I won't actually talk about the ECJ program, but I'll talk about coal within the context of a broader environmental and climate justice analysis. Talk a little bit about disproportionate exposure for the communities that I told you about, how that impacts groups, and then specifically around coal and communities of color. Then I'll go specifically into the Jack Watson Gulfport profile. Then talk a little bit about what we were talking about before in terms of the profit making that often drives decisions in a way that's not necessarily valuing the people who are impacted. And then again, like I said, talk about the vision for energy and economic transition. Thank you, Phyllis. And we're talking about disproportionate exposure. In this picture, you see the two smokestacks stacked out there in the back, and then you see the two kids playing next to the church there. You see one with a bat and one on a bicycle. And this, unfortunately, is an image that we see too often. These coal plants right in the middle of communities. African Americans, 78% of African Americans live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant. And it's not only economic issues, but it's also waste outside of economic issues, because an African American family making $50,000 a year is more likely to live next to a toxic facility than a white family making $15,000 a year. And this was found in some of the early studies, and comparing census data and the location of these properties. And so, again, this is the plant that we were talking about earlier in Chicago, one of the two plants that actually were closed as a result of a citizen action in Chicago. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So part of the issue, too, is that we're not only facing pollution from coal plants, but we were talking earlier about the health statistics. We also have these other pollutants that we're surrounded by. So whether it's the BP oil drilling disaster or other kinds of toxic facilities in this kind of petrochemical corridor that we've got going on down here in the Gulf region. And this is just an example of the types of things that we're surrounded with. This is the Cesar Chavez High School in Houston, Texas. And that oil refinery there, you can't see this is the biggest picture because the other view of the picture shows the kids who are playing on the playground there, or on the ball field. But that's one of 5 oil refineries within a 10-mile radius of that school. So again, to just give you a sense that, we have these compounded issues. And even the Jack Watson plant is right next to the highway, and the highway also, where we as communities of color and low-income communities are disproportionately impacted by near roadway air pollution. And when you start to keep these different pollutants on top of each other, this is why the American Lung Association ranked Gulfport as having an F in their study of bad ozone days, because we have all of these different pollutants that are affecting our everyday life. So, just another example of a coal plant in Michigan, and then that's a park that's right next to it. When I was there another day, they were actually, having a picnic in that table, in that, shelter, picnic shelter there. They were doing the electric slide under there, and the coal plant is just literally right there. And unfortunately, again, it's just another image of how these plants are right in our backyard, right next to us. And then we have not only the air pollution that comes from these plants, but but we also have the water pollution that also comes because most of the plants are by waterways because they take the water and they use it as part of the electricity generating process. And then that yellow arrow is pointing to the pipe that's coming from one of the plants in that area that's going off into the water. You see the water's kind of this greenish brown color, and often in these places the waters have fishing advisories. The fellow, the reverend, whose name I can't, who helped us to set up and was doing our lighting here, and he was asking about health impacts and particularly about birth defects. The mercury advisories are ones that are most commonly associated with these coal plants, and that mercury is one of the several toxins that's being emitted from coal plants. And so when we have populations, particularly in this area, but even this is in Michigan actually, where people are more often substances fisher folks, and often ignoring these advisories. And so a lot of times people will kind of put that as a personal responsibility thing, but this person is just trying to put food on the table. And so it should be not a personal responsibility, like you shouldn't be fishing in waters with advisories. We shouldn't have all these waters that have fishing advisories. We should be able to fish the bounty out of our lakes and waterways, and as opposed to having them being contaminated by coal plants and so forth. So this is someone who was going out there to fish. There was another person who was also doing the same thing. We were talking to, when I was giving this talk at another point, one of the executive vice presidents of the NAACP said that when he was young, he would fish out of the water when rent would become due, money would become low, until the day that he pulled the fish out of the water and all the scales fell off the fish. So again, when you're fishing in these kind of really contaminated waterways, the impacts on the fish and then the impacts on our bodies are well documented. So the types of pollutants that come from these plants include, like I said, mercury, but also, as I also said, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, arsenic, lead, cadmium, benzene. These are the types of toxins that come out of these plants. And they affect not only in terms of birth defects and so forth, but they also affect our respiratory condition. And so we have issues with lung disease and with asthma. And as I said before, we are, as African Americans, disproportionately exposed to coal plant pollution, and we also disproportionately have asthma. So you start to see these links with this. And African Americans are 3 times as likely to enter into the hospital from asthma attacks and twice as likely to die from asthma attacks, particularly African American children. And then we're also more likely to have lung disease, but less likely to smoke. So again, once you know that the lung disease is most often tied to smoking, you really have to look elsewhere when you start to see these high lung disease rates. And the American Lung Association report, and the folks who will be here for the town hall meeting will back this up for us. And what does that mean in terms of our children? So again, the same gentleman was asking not only about birth defects, but he was also asking about learning impacts for children. So this young man, his name Antoine, that was his set of medicines that were in the previous slide. And they talked about how many days of school he misses because of his asthma. So not only do we have people losing school because of asthma, but we also have people being impacted even when they're in school because, like I said, lead is one of the things that comes out of these coal plants. And as we know, lead is tied to attention deficit disorder and attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So when we start to tie that in with even some of the NAACP bedrock civil and human rights issues, we talk about the school to prison pipeline. And we know from studies that if you're not on grade level by the 3rd grade, you're more likely to enter into the criminal justice system. So we have kids who are out of school either because they have asthma or when they're in school they can't pay attention, they end up having behavior problems, and you start to see how all of this fits together. And then when you couple that with the fact that that school systems are funded by property values of the homes and the businesses surrounding those schools and property taxes, and the fact that when toxic facilities in your neighborhood, your property values are average 15% lower than other neighborhoods, you again just start to see how people's bodies are being affected, people's learning are being affected, and then even the very places where they're supposed to learn is also. So it's just layers and layers of impact for our communities. So I promise we're going to start talking about some more positive things soon. We're going to get progressively firmer and then we're going to go back. But then the other thing is that we know that coal-fired power plants, well, some of us know that coal-fired power plants are the number one emitter of carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is the number one greenhouse gas that drives climate change. And what does that mean for us? Unfortunately, a lot, because we're in this hurricane zone. We're also in an area that has a lot of tornadoes. And so this is the impact of a tornado. We all have seen all too often the images from Katrina, Hurricane Isaac, and all the other different storms that have come through. Not only do we have this kind of geographic exposure and impact, but we also have this situation where our communities are often either have poor housing stock or low most in need of information. So on the stage we have folks who are from FEMA, the Red Cross, local government, all white, and the people who are lined up at the microphone to ask questions, all African American and women at that. So again, we start to see like the political dynamics too as well. So how does Jack Watson play into all this? This is just some statistics about the Jack Watson plant. It was built in 1968. It's owned by the Southern Company. Their subsidiary company is Mississippi Power. It produces 5 million megawatt, an annual of 5 million megawatt hours of electricity on average, and the carbon dioxide emissions it's 5 million tons. The average, and the sulfur dioxide emissions are 21,929 tons average, and then the nitrogen oxide emissions are 9,644 tons average. Those numbers are just kind of numbers, but sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, as I said, are tied to the asthma and the different respiratory rates, as well as some of the heart attack issues and so forth that the stresses on the body. So who's breathing the Jack Watson air pollution? This is the number of people within a 3-mile radius of the plant, about 22,921 people. Average income is $20,760. And the percentage of people who are people of color, about 25%. And as a result of looking at all those factors, the grade from the cold blood report was D-. We also just wanted to pull up some Harrison County health data because, as we said, the toxins from the plant tied to some of the indicators that we see here. So this is just kind of a racial comparison of some of the health statistics, and we'll see in a minute the same stats that you have in your packet about the Clean Air Task Force statistics around death and disease attributable to the fine particle pollution from the Jack Watson plant. And that actually answers the question from the gentleman earlier in terms of why cancer wasn't listed here. Is it because this isn't death and disease attributable to the Jack Watson plant in general, like all the different pollutants there, like the mercury, the benzene, and so forth. It's specific to the fine particle pollution. And fine particle pollution isn't in and of itself tied to cancer. So that answers, Kathy, if you ever have a chance to talk to him, you can explain that answer to him. Otherwise, other relevant findings in terms of looking at the coal plant is the American Lung Association graded an F for the number of poor ozone days, basically the days where you have concentrated air pollution. And then the Union of Concerned Scientists ranked it as one of the highest plants in terms of being ripe for retirement. Ripe for retirement based on an economic analysis of what's going to take for them to upgrade that plant to make it, livable for the communities versus and what their outputs and profit margin will be. So, Union of Concerned Scientists analysis found that it was indeed ripe for retirement. We're going to hopefully have that at the town hall meeting as well to give you more of this data and analysis about that. So I'm going to try to wrap up quickly here, but as Kathy said, Southern Company, which is the parent company for Mississippi Power, tops the list in terms of their spending on lobbying to try to keep us from having regulations like the mercury and toxic rule, the carbon pollution standard that cuts down on the pollution from these plants. So they also apply that money to making sure that we don't have in Mississippi a renewable portfolio standard, an energy efficiency standard, or net metering, which are all policies that can help us shift to having better energy efficiency and better clean energy. So Mississippi stays as one of the few states in the union, one of only 7 states out of 50 states that doesn't have net metering, which allows you to, as an individual, if you had a solar panel on your roof, if they had a net metering policy, it would mean that if you generate more energy from that solar panel than you use, you can sell it back to the grid for the same amount you would have bought your energy for. So, but again, that's not in place because the Southern Company has such a strong hold in terms of their lobbying around state level policies. And this is just another example of Southern Company successfully leading a campaign to oppose renewable portfolio standard, which would allow you to have more energy generated from clean energy. So these are the states that Southern Company has holdings in. So there's Alabama Power, there's Southern Company working directly in Florida, there's Georgia Power, and then there's Mississippi Power. And and again, really these states are also the ones with the ones out of compared to the rest of the country that has energy efficiency standards, that has renewable portfolio standards, and tend to have net metering. In this region, which for us is Region 5 of the NAACP, we see where it's kind of no for the most part in terms of having these policies in place. So you don't really have the policy landscape that would really support a robust, energy efficient society, and society that relies on clean energy instead of fossil fuel-based energy that's harming our health. So, and again, this is to see where Southern Company lines up in terms of the profits that they're getting from the work that they're doing. So Ms. Rose made a very good point there in talking about the types of profits we're talking about. So in this list we have a range from folks making $10 million a year to $16 million and more in terms of the CEO compensation package. Southern Company comes out, yes, on the lower end, relatively, but it's still $6 million in CEO compensation. And this is the average CEO compensation for the companies that I just showed before, was $9.7 million, and the average worker made $33,000. And on average, the CEOs of these companies were compensated at 289 times the rate of the average worker in those companies. And so when we go back and we see the amount of money that they're putting towards lobbying, these are the types of profits that they're protecting, and then yet at the same time, our rates are going up in terms of our consumer rates for our electricity. So this really kind of tells a story. So I want to just kind of quickly talk about the types of considerations that people get concerned about when we talk about coal plants, and particularly the idea of shutting down coal plants. People get concerned about the revenue from the plants because often they pay high tax dollars, and for some communities, the communities really rely on those taxes for the public services and so forth in the community. There's jobs often associated with the plant, and then there's also the electricity. So it's a good question to try to figure out with Jack Watson, the people who are working in the plant, how many of them actually live in the community, the revenue from the plant, are we actually seeing an end goal for it? And then is the electricity from the plant being served, are the community, the members of Gulfport being served by the electricity? In Chicago, when they shut down those two plants, it was pretty easy kind of advocacy to get folks around it because no one in the community knew anyone who worked in the plants. So people were always kind of coming in from out of town to work in the plant. It was a blighted community, deep poverty. So it was very questionable to them. If the revenue was coming to the city, it wasn't coming to that neighborhood that was close to the plant. And then that area was actually getting their electricity from a nuclear plant, which that's a whole other conversation, a whole other presentation. But we know the coal plants don't, and the coal plant there can generate electricity for that community. So the community was getting none of the benefits from the plant, and they were getting only poor health impacts. The Harvard School of Public Health actually did a study in that area of Chicago and found that they attributed 40 deaths and 1,000 asthma hospitalizations to those two plants in Chicago. So for them, it was a no-brainer to just basically shut down those two plants because they weren't. And as Kathy said, we haven't heard of any blackouts in Chicago or people in the unemployment lines or any major impacts because they had done that analysis beforehand. So these are some of the alternatives that folks look at when they talk about closing down plants, putting in pollution controls, converting to cleaner forms of energy, and then of course with that closing the plant itself. So I just want to talk just briefly about what we're looking at in terms of alternatives. Right now, this is a study that was done by the American Association of Black in Energy. They found that African Americans spent $40 billion on electricity in 2009. African Americans only had 1.1% of the jobs in the energy sector and only earned less than 1% of the revenue from the energy sector. So when we look at that against our overall economic plight of double-digit unemployment, we have white communities who are white median household wealth 20 times higher than that of black households. And then we look at that against the fact that we're the host to these cash cow coal plants that are making millions of dollars for CEOs and for these companies in general, so much so that they can afford to spend $13 million on lobbying alone. Then we start to really see kind of a picture of real, true injustice for our communities. So we really, stewarding the path towards energy efficiency, towards clean energy. There's lots of wind, and we know there's lots of sun here, so we really can be looking at alternatives. This is a friend of mine, actually, in Pennsylvania, not even with the bounty of wind and sun that we have down here. But in Pennsylvania, he has the solar panels on his roof, and they have net metering. So he watches his meter go backwards every day, and he gets a check from the energy company as opposed to having to pay one every month. And he also gets all of his heating and cooling from a geothermal system that he has built in. And because Pennsylvania has such a robust support for these things, that he actually got a grant to put so his capital investment, even in the solar panels, were low because they have a great policy landscape for this kind of thing. And that's what we need to be looking to change here in Mississippi, because we have a company that spends $13 million on lobbying against those very policies that allows us to benefit as consumers. So, wrapping up, because I'm running out of breath, but wrapping up, there are just so many opportunities for alternate energy, or alternate economic enterprise for areas. Even looking, this is kind of under the area of energy efficiency. I don't know whether you have landfills or incinerators or how you deal with your waste, but there's communities across the country who have taken their waste and done 75% waste diversion, so that none of it goes to landfills or incinerators, which are also health harming. They generate the same kind of pollutants that we see from coal plants. And they actually have started recycling initiatives and created 1.5 million jobs to be created from 75% waste diversion nationally. Yes.
Jackie, great presentation so far. Yes. I want to ask one question. Who's the go-to person for the NAACP nationally to put a program together here in the South region, because this is basically SEC country, for solar and geothermal energy processes? Who handles that at the national level?
That would be me, that facilitates something like that. We actually are working with this group called Fifth Energy that's doing, they actually built around the corner from our facility, the largest solar array in Maryland, and they're working with companies, with communities across the country on developing community-owned solar. And also the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and the community, the Center for Social Inclusion. So we're partnering with groups that are willing to have that experience to do that with communities. This is one of the conversations I was hoping to have with the Gulf War branch about where you want to go and try to lead that kind of transition here.
Well, I think so, with
excuse me, can we go on with the agenda, and there is a place for question and answer. So let's get through everybody's presentation. If you can just hold it, and if Jackie finishes, we can go ahead and hear Rose's presentation, and then we'll hear Mr. Down.
So I was just showing also that that having that kind of transition is also cheaper in terms of how much it costs to operate these. And then local ownership creates 2 to 3 times as many jobs per megawatt produced of energy than having these kind of large, centralized electricity facilities. So you can really look at local jobs and local ownership for your energy infrastructure. This is something that we're really trying to promote at the NAACP, and we're very much looking forward to hopefully working with Gulfport on that if you're interested. So, thank you. And that's my information if you wanted to.
Mine stops.
Can you hear me? Good evening, everyone. I bring you greetings from the Mississippi chapter of Sierra Club. Sierra Club is committed to shutting down old coal-fired power plants. Sierra Club is committed to stopping Kemper County plant from coming online. Sierra Club refers to the Kemper County plant as being one of the biggest boondoggles in the history of this power generation. The plant continues its construction with untested technology. It is over budgeted and economically unjustifiable. Now, despite the significant improvements in our environmental protection over the past decades, over 1.3 billion people worldwide still live in unsafe and unhealthy environments. We must sound the alarm about public health disparity and stop polluting industries from poisoning our air, our water, and our communities. Everyone deserves clean air and clean water. We believe that every breath is a blessing. God entrusted this magnificent universe to all of us and all of its beauty for us to enjoy and explore. We must be good stewards of the land. Far too often, low-income, underserved, people of color communities like North Gulfport and Turkey Creek are chosen as sites for polluting industries. These communities will bear a disproportionate burden of pollution. In 1987, a Commission on Racial Justice report showed the most significant factor in determining hazardous waste facility sites nationwide was race. The study also found that 3 out of every 5 African American and Hispanic live in communities with unregulated landfill, toxic waste sites. 20 years later, they conducted the same study and found the results to be the same. With Mississippi Power plant Jack Watson on Lorraine, just within miles of our community, we are very much concerned about air pollution, especially the emissions of particulate matter from Plant Watson. These fine particles consist of soot, heavy metal, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxide. These airborne contaminants can stay in the air for 3 days and can travel up to 100 miles. These tiny particles enter the body when we breathe through our nose and mouth and get lodged in our lungs and travel through our bloodstream to other vital organs in the body. Particulate matter can cause cancer and heart disease. We worry that our children and senior citizens are not breathing clean air or drinking clean water. These communities are already suffering from a high rate of asthma, emphysema, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and other respiratory illness. We need Plant Watson to clean up its pollution now. In 1970, when the Clean Air Act was passed by Congress, older existing plants like Mississippi Power Plant Watson were exempt from the requirements of legislation by grandfathering in their ability to contaminate through burning coal. Today, Mississippi Power is considered one of the oldest, dirtiest coal-fired power plant in the country. Did you know children are being born with a mixture of over 200 man-made chemicals in their bloodstream? And some women of childbearing age have enough mercury in their blood to harm a developing fetus. Mercury comes from the fish, from the fallout of mercury in our creeks and rivers. The mother eats the fish and it's passed on to the fetus. The largest source of mercury comes from coal-fired power plants. We must advocate for power plants and other polluting industries to reduce their emissions in our air. According to the World Health Organization, 80% of chronic disease is environmental, not genetic. A recent study estimated that approximately 64,000 people in the United States die prematurely from heart and lung disease every year. We must do a better job. We must ask MDEQ to do a better job in protecting our public health and the environment for our children and for future generations to come. No person or group should ever bear a greater share of negative environmental impacts.
Well, like Jackie started off, kind of doom and gloom, yes, we've got some things to do better. What we came here for today was the pre-meeting to ask y'all, I don't have a big presentation for you, but basically to plan for this next meeting, to hear from y'all what you want us to do, to prepare for this meeting, and then at that meeting, the things like what we've heard from Jackie and Rose and Catherine today is where you need us to do better. That's what I see this meeting. That's what I see DEQ trying to gather from this meeting. What do we need better? What do we need to communicate with the communities better? What do we need to provide y'all? What information do we need to provide y'all so y'all can make informed decisions yourselves of what's best for your community? We can't tell you what's best. What we can do is work through the policies, through the laws, through the regulations we have now to make a better environment, to protect the public health. I think we take that role very seriously throughout my staff. One of the things we've done, as you see right here, as a result of it, is Melissa Collier and Office of Community Engagement that Executive Director Fisher established in the last few years to do and try to accomplish many of these things. Melissa, I hope will tell you, she has full access to the approximately 300 engineers and scientists of my staff to try to answer these questions for you when these things come up. We get questions like this. What we try to do today for Catherine in her request is provide her the facts. What I tried to avoid, Catherine, in sending you the information is opinions from us. We would like, our goal on things like this with Plant Watson and others is provide you facts and let you make your own opinions about what's best for your community. I will end, and we have some additional information to share with y'all. It is not all doom and gloom. The ozone is an issue down here. The particulate matter is an issue. But I guess the good side is because of efforts from people like you, because of efforts, I like to think from some of my staff and some of the responsible industry around, is we are seeing improving numbers, even on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, the heavy industrialized area. We are seeing improvements in ozone, in particulate matter, and this is a downward trend as far as the amount of pollution. So those are very encouraging results from us, and we're going to share that with y'all. What I really need from y'all in this pre-meeting today is what would you like our role to be in the upcoming meeting? What do you want, is there something specific you want us to hear or present? But we're taking more of a learning session of things we can take back today and next week that we can gather, take back, and then come back to you on. So that's what I hope to gather out of today's meeting and also next week's meeting. So,
go on. I'm Pastor Jody Barnes, Gulfport. you are the director of the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality?
I'm kind of the director of Office of Pollution Control, which has the air, water, all those programs under it.
So which means this is a state agency funded by the state?
It's funded by the state and then through delegation from the Federal Environmental Protection Agency.
So therefore, there is an upward, in other words, you represent the state and there are people in the federal level.
That's right.
Okay, my question then is who dropped the ball?
So
Who dropped the ball? That you would allow the problem to get as bad as it is, because there are regulatory commissions that are supposed to be regulating it. There are individuals who are supposed to be coming out and inspecting it, then individuals who are to then come back out and see that it's been done. Who's dropping the ball?
You know, I think it's a matter of policy. I mean, the ball does not get dropped. If you look at the compliance history of this plant Watson, it's, for the most part, has a fairly good compliance rate. What you have is the 60s, 70s, and 80s, if you had these leak controls, you had antiquated equipment, and then those type of things, and you saw this increase in air pollution.
What I'm seeing
back there. Now, what you've seen in the last 10 years is the trend, we believe, hopefully, this peak and is continuing downward, at least in Mississippi.
No, what I am seeing is this: an increase in profit and a decrease in maintenance. And there has to be someone responsible in the government level, whether state or federal, to ensure that this is done. You're looking at salaries of $4, $5, $9, $10, $12, $13 million. You can spend $13 million on lobbyists, but yet you cannot maintain the quality that is supposed to be in your plant. Somebody's getting paid off at the expense of the individuals who are living in this area. And then they have the unmitigated gall to have us pay for a plant that is not even built yet. Say, now tell me, where does this come from? I'm not getting any benefit from it. Their stockholders don't even have to invest in it. So tell me, who got paid off in Jackson?
Nobody at our agency, I can tell you that. Again, it's a policy. I mean, it's a policy type decision.
You keep using this term policy. People make policies.
I agree.
I am not originally from Mississippi, but just as bad Alabama. They do the same thing there. People make policies to benefit certain people and to deny other people what they need.
And that goes back to what I said. Our goal is to educate you, to provide you with the facts so you can influence the policy making.
And just let me say, these are messengers. But I'm just saying, these are our messengers. And it's just like when I kind of bit Melissa's head off for when she gave me the message that I would have to drive to Jackson to get the records. So we do appreciate you coming, and they did say they're coming to get some information. And these are very valid questions and everything. But I think in the policy making, you're not, what I'm trying to say, you're not at the policy. You don't make the policies, do you?
I mean, we make policies on how we're going to interpret the regulations or how we're going to interpret the laws, but we don't write the laws. And I think that's where the issue is, in my opinion, is how the laws have been structured. Just as you heard Rose say, in 1970, I mean, I was just born, they made the decision when they passed the Clean Air Act to exempt these older facilities. We don't have the legal authority to go make them change. What we have is the Clean Air Act to enforce. We enforce the Clean Air Act, but there's exemptions within there that we did not decide upon, and we don't have the authority to change.
So you're saying that Plant Watson has certain exemptions that if it had been built after a certain date, they've been grandfathered in to some of this stuff that's happening to us. So I won't say
There is a big exception to that. That is how the law was written. The Clean Air Act was written that for reasonableness, all of the existing plants didn't have to immediately meet the new standards that were written into the law. However, once a new source review happened, once a plant did major maintenance or a major upgrade, then it did have to meet it. It's my understanding, I've always gotten different answers, that during the Bush administration, that plant did upgrow some major changes, but they put limit, they changed new source review because of the Bush administration, because of lobbyists and people that like the profits of these companies. So in the 2000s, that plant was majorly upgraded. It should have been upgraded to the most modern standards. But because the Bush administration gave exceptions to those rules, it wasn't. It was done the cheapest way you could do it, and it's still as dirty as ever. So,
in other words, somebody got paid.
Lots of people got paid, of course.
Yeah, I know. I'm talking. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I like that you clarified your position here as messenger, because as messenger, you relay messages both to us and we'll take them back. This is what I want you to take back. I want you to know, is it proper, is it possible for your organization to file suit against Mississippi Power for lobbying so hard against things such as net metering policies, Clean Air Acts, because it seems to me like they have a history of working against the health benefits of Mississippi residents on a whole. So if you start looking into their lobbying policies and when they started, you might see a correlation between those who are in power in the state level, because I'm certain that those on the state level have some affiliation with the power industries, or they may be sitting on oversight committees and there's somebody else who they're closely affiliated with, or they're contractors or consultants too. So I'd like to know, is it possible for your organization to file suit, get the state attorney to work with you, file suit against them, to prevent them from lobbying to the disadvantage of the residents who are paying for their services? Now, how long does the grandfathering policy take place? So you're grandfathering in poison. That's the translation I'm receiving. So ask them, how long will you grandfather in poison so that it can continue to disseminate health compromises to this area down here? And I'm just going to go on like that, and y'all can have a follow after that.
Briefly, the two questions. No, I do not think we have the legal authority to file a lawsuit against Mississippi Power for lobbying. I think that's what Sierra Club and Steps and a lot of them, I think that's their role.
That's what we do.
And that's exactly what we do. Now, what we do have legal authorities about, when a new rule does come out, we do have legal authority to petition or file suits against sometimes EPA that's funding us about whether we think the effectiveness of that rule or that regulation. And we do that all the time. We either provide comments back to them, or in some cases
So how heavy is your commenting?
What's that?
What weight does your commenting carry? So if I understand this properly, you have the potential to influence policy.
Yes, I would say we do have to put in.
Okay. So I now know that you are able to influence the implementation of clean air policies here in Mississippi. So, Trudy Fisher, she's been in office, this is her first term, or
She's appointed by the governor, she's not elected official.
Okay. So the previous persons in her position, have they been working for clean air policies?
Yes.
They have. And so I guess I'd like to know, how is it that they haven't been able to make progress after all these times? I'm not from Mississippi, so I don't know.
I think we have made progress, and that's my point. If you look at the trends for the last few years, they are down and continuing in downward trends. So we believe we have made progress.
Well, I know, people are good at saying that trends and downs, we can measure those downward trends by 0.01%, and companies are going to call that progress. But I'm the layman. I don't care about those incremental things. I want to see 1%, 2, 10%. I don't want to hear anything under 1%, because that impact is negligible.
And for instance, one way we develop and comment on policy is ozone pollution. EPA, they started off with a standard of around 90, which continued to go down through the year. For Mississippi, for most areas, we've been able to match it. So we stay, basically, we show a downward trend with that. A lot of that's due to the way we affect policy, better fuel mileage, vehicles. A lot of your sources of air pollution are vehicles. EPA, the states, that's one way they affect policy is in policies like that that promote that. I made a note of one thing Rose mentioned on the diverting waste. And we'll talk about this, and probably one thing we'll talk about based on that at the next meeting. One of the ways we promote policy, promote things like that is we do have funds. We recently did grants, or opened up grants to communities to develop diversion programs away from the landfills because one, it reduces pollution, it avoids landfills, and it creates jobs, we believe. So that's one way we can affect policy. And especially in rural Mississippi, it's pretty easy to do that in Jackson or the bigger communities. But what we've tried to do is go to these small communities. One of them said, hey, we'll give you some grant money to get started. Why don't 4 or 5 of y'all pool your resources in these rural areas, and together you can be successful where any one of you probably would not be. So there are things like that we have on that. But the second question I want to go back to real quickly, and again, you asked how long are these exemptions? They are, the Clean Air Act is the most complicated act out there, much more complicated than the Clean Water Act or the Hazardous Waste type act, because there's so many exemptions for that very reason, and they vary greatly. So I can't give you a simple answer of how long are these exemptions out there. It varies tremendously.
So does Mississippi State have an expert attorney on it? Because I know that the power companies have their experts who are always working. They're paid. They're paid to capitalize, and they're paid to work and live inside these exemptions. Do we have someone who is on our side who is working to combat them at their own game?
Yes, we have a team of engineers and scientists and attorneys, and every time they make a modification or change, and that's one of the things I think we sent Catherine, is every time, we go back to actually the plant we show opened in 1955, and it had a major upgrade in 1968 to start burning coal. They actually had 2 gas turbines as early as 1955 at Plant Watson. And every time they make an expansion or a change, we evaluate to see if they trigger any of these things that causes them to lose their exemption. So yes, we do. They don't get to make that evaluation in their own. They make it, they submit it to us for review, and then we review it to see if we concur. So I think we do have that expertise in how to do that.
And so with oil, one more question before we go to, since we had the oil spill in the Gulf, that came about because of a lack of inspections and oversight. Do we still struggle with that in terms of the power plants here in Mississippi? With consistent inspections, like what is the inspection schedules, so that we know that things are up to par, and so that if a smokestack is emitting more than it should be, who's going to be the person to sound the alarm so that those in the state level can come in and either A, shut them down, or B, fine them in such a heavy fashion that will compensate all those who are breathing up the poison?
But, I mean, short answer, could I use more resource? Yeah. Do I think we have enough right now that we're adequately doing our job as far as compliance reporting? Yes. I think.
You said you have enough?
I think I have enough. Could I use more? Yes. But, I mean, we have a routine inspection schedule, and it varies. The way the programs are generally set up is the more you pollute, I don't care whether you're talking about air, or water, or solid waste, the more frequent you regulate. So we focus on the bigger companies, and many of them have annual inspections for water, what we call water majors. Anybody they're inspected annually. If you're way down here, yes, you're probably not inspected.
But they know when you're coming, correct?
No. Most of our compliance inspections, for the most part, are unannounced. We show up at the door and say we're here to inspect in almost every area.
Oh,
Hi,
I
Chief.
just want to give a little bit of good news. I know it's the air quality since 1960s has improved by 40%. And what EPA does is, you're right, they have grandfathered the existing power plants, but every 5 years, the Clean Air Act EPA has to evaluate the standards for PM, NOx, SO2, ozone, and lead. So what they have done over the years is they have, like the standard, like Richard said, was over 100 for ozone. They came down to 84, and now their standard has come down to 75. So they keep reducing those numbers, which means that it's become harder and harder for industry, so you have to meet these numbers. And the good news is, and that's my job, and that's Richard makes sure I do my job, is to see that Mississippi meets all those standards, and we are only one of 3 states east of the Mississippi River which meet standards for all pollutants. So when Ms. Jackie talked about, I hate to say that, but in Baltimore, that's a big issue. You have ozone issues there because they have exceeded the standard, and we have been meeting a standard, and I'm passed out just the trends, and I would be happy to answer questions. So even though Mississippi Power probably doesn't have the latest and the greatest technology because it's an existing plant, we have to, if they did not meet the standards, then we would have authority to ask them to put on additional controls.
So why are we having this conversation if they're meeting standards? Like why are they having concerns enough to put together a pamphlet to make allegations that kids are dying, people are having asthma attacks? That's what I'm confused about.
It's not to say we can't do better.
Right.
I mean, I think that's the difference.
Right, but do we have a problem based on standards? No, we do not have problems. That being said, what she said is right, it's an existing plant. So if a new plant was built today, it would have much tighter controls than the existing plants because but as a state, I don't know how we can make them put on controls because right now it's not required. And we could make them put controls if we did not meet the standards. So that's one of those things. And the second thing is...
Are we doing this in vain?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I'm really confused as to I'm confused as to what she's telling me.
I think there's 2 things that the community,
right.
trying not to avoid it. One is particulate matter. That's one of the big causes of ozone. Right now, the particulate standard is 15. And we're meeting that standard. But at 15, we still know there's a certain amount of children that it's going to affect. So it's 15 good enough. And now they just reduced it to 12.
Is that a positive or negative?
It's a positive.
It's a positive. They tightened the standard.
They made it much tighter, 12. And and actually it's funny because I'm so happy this year. This is one of the, it's going down in the right direction right now, and we work hard every single day to see how low we can take those numbers. I mean, that's our objective, and we're working. Now, if they go ahead and put add-on controls, will it help the numbers go down even more? Probably will help the numbers go down even more. So that's not something we'd like to have additional controls, to get the numbers down.
I think, again, there's two goals I think you ought to have. One is continue to apply pressure to the policymakers so these standards don't go back up or continue to trend downward for the standards themselves. I think the main reason they're here today is because these standards look at the whole area, the whole Gulf Coast area. I think their question is, because of the proximity to some of these industries, is this community having a disproportionate share of effects? We can say at 12 parts, at the particular matter level of 12, the general community may have 20 applications. I'm just making up numbers to give you an example. But their question is our isolated subset of that community have 10 of the 12? And I think that's the question we're trying to answer here today, Rose and Ruth and Catherine, as I understand it. And that's something the science still needs to keep working on. some cases, we can't adequately answer that question today. Becky, do you disagree or agree?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think I think you just laid out the 2 points. One is that the standards are not adequate. So to say they're meeting standards, they're saying they're meeting pretty inadequate standards. So that's definitely the biggest issue. And then secondly, the fact that the way they measure it, they look at kind of what they call they look at these areas that are bigger than, and so if you're living right up under, if you're living within a 3-mile radius of a plant, the whole area might be meeting the standard, but the people who live within a 3-mile radius might be choking down some very toxic stuff. So so those are really the 2 issues. And the other thing I wanted to ask is a question.
Do you agree with that analysis?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that the fact. I don't know. I can't say that people are disproportionate.
She didn't ask it as a matter of fact. She was just asking. She was just saying.
Yeah,
that might be the case.
I think that's what we need to study.
No, I'm trying to get you to say that very close to the site. So that's lucky because we have a monitor which is not very far. At the last page, if you see, actually, we only have 8 monitors in the state for ozone and PM, and the monitor is pretty close to the site. So we think it is quite representative of the community.
But that's the kind of information we need to provide.
Right.
Which also takes us back to the other question of the standard being paid for. So, and then the other thing I wanted to also say around that is that in Chicago, what they did was, because the standards, the federal standards are insufficient, they did a local ordinance for Chicago. And so, is that possible to do more? So some states don't have that ability. Like you can't have a city standard.
Yeah, I think our state law prohibits.
The very fact that the state law prohibits that is another issue around the advocacy that we need policy.
And the state can tell us that we can't, we have concerns that we can't go to our local government and petition for change.
You can't establish a standard, a local standard. And that's not uncommon. I think Chicago.
You said we can't.
You cannot. You cannot. Gulfport could not establish its own.
Well, let me add one grandfather in overseas that. So if you compare Jack Robinson today, if it were not grandfather in, I'd really like, that's what I'd like to see. Where would we be?
Yeah, that's an evaluation we have to do.
Brother Mangle? What do you say?
I'm Vernon Mangle. I'm a Mississippi native. And I've been concerned about this for years, about this process, these policies, our lack of legislative guidance and coverage. I think the most important thing that we need to address is, when has MDEC actually closed a facility? What standards are to be delivered to the community leaders to identify everything that should be, that is considered substandard? The next thing is, we keep talking about the 50s and the 60s. What about 2010 and in the future? The thing that occurred in 50s, 60s, 70s, even in the major area of Jackson Armstrong, is Grand Gulf. And that's probably had a great impact in Fort Gibson than any part of the state of Mississippi. Well, the bottom line here, we define exactly what are the substandards that are causing these issues between the Jack Watson plant. Because that affects not only Gulfport areas, but also crosses the line and points to Biloxi as well. The bottom line here, everybody's been well represented and spoke highly of a lot of different organizations, but the bottom line is, MDEC works for the ratepayers, bottom line, period. So until we get that addressed, we won't have an issue. We have a great representative, past and present, Francis Fredericks, as well as now Sonia Barnes-Williams. We have a great advocate at the national level, the NAACP as the board member, that's Kevin Agnew. We have a great representative that gives us the information, environment and climate justice, that's Jackie Patterson. But now we have to have everyone else do their jobs, bottom line. That's not what happened. We know how in politics, things would either waver from one side to another, basically Republican or Democrat or Union middle. But we have to have this finalized. Simple as that. I know right now we're getting ready to go to the midterms, and they say, there's going to be a another election process. Some of these cases around the state are not going to be there because if somebody loses or somebody else wins, your job's on the line. That's the bottom line. And the key is the voters. If we galvanize the voters, you can lobby whoever you need to lobby. We have significant changes. That's the bottom line. The reason why I know this, two of our brothers were the first two African American man and woman in the metro area to be elected. And they've served about 20, 25 years in those areas. And I can tell you, if you want change, you must do it yourself. Thank you.
Okay. Were there any other hands out there? John and then Melissa?
My question is back to DE. There was an excursion at any particular plant in Mississippi today. How long would it take for that plant to inform you? And also, how long would it take for us to host the reality show?
You talking about like an incident type of release?
Yes, yes.
I'd have to look at our times. I don't know that offhand. I mean, they have, depending on the type facility, what type of release it is, I think it's going to vary. For any hazardous material, they're required to report it to the National Response Center, and that's a national response center. Then it actually flows down to the state, and then also to the local EMA to evaluate the response. As far as air emissions, like if they had an upset, I mean, some facilities have online systems and basically reporting on containment to us and that type of thing.
And the rules, they have to report as soon as possible, but no later than 5 days. That's how the regulations spell out. But
well, that would be like Hurricane Katrina. I mean, that's the maximum. No matter what, they're not allowed to meet.
But we usually get calls, we get calls
we generally expect
immediately. Yeah, as soon as they find out, they're supposed to let us know. Because if they don't, then when we take enforcement action, that's counted against them. If they don't inform us the moment they found out, and what they did to stop the extortion.
And then when and how or we
as soon as they
how and when are the informed
public is informed. It depends on whether the excursion cost. Most of the time, it's on plant property. Each facility. I'm sorry, I'm talking just about aircraft. As long as there's no effect outside the fence line, then if the public is not impacted, then otherwise, yes, we would inform the public. If any time we think the public is impacted. But if there's an excursion, the excursion is not, if they exceeded a permit limit or something, then they have to let us know as soon as possible. And if it affects the public,
Something we think is imminent.
right, then we would inform the public or evacuate the public if needed.
In general, the process as it flows now is if we need to notify the public, we're going to go to the county emergency management director. So it's going to flow from us down here to River Lacey or one of those. And we wouldn't even make a decision for evacuation. The evacuation might make a recommendation, but that authority actually rests with the county emergency management agency. We don't have any authority to order evacuation. The county does. So we would be in consultation with them, like we advise them, say you had some major leaks. So, we're going to go to the county emergency management agency. Is how we're going to communicate.
And my question is this: since Glenn Jack Watson was grandfathered in, and since there have been so many changes in how we do things and what needs to be done at any time, is it possible for you to make a recommendation of an upgrade at Jack Watson that's needed? I know you said you don't get into that, but how do we know that that plant needs an upgrade if you don't tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Maya talk about it, but there's several things that kick into place. Like I said, we evaluate, and I've got a list of modifications they've done, and they have had to do some things. For instance, in 2007, they made some changes, and they were required to replace their older burners with low emitting burners in like 2 of their units, 4 and 5. So they installed some upgrades to a more efficient burner, for instance, in 2007. So they've had some things to do. I think the best way you can look at it, the simplest evaluation is look at how much electricity they produce and look at their emissions and compare them with some other states. And that's what I think y'all typically did in a lot of y'all reports, is how much are they producing and how much energy are they producing versus how much pollution are they producing, and is it worth the trade-off? A newer, more modern plant.
So it was worth us getting a D- to get to.
I mean, no.
I just want to know if it's
but like I said, we don't have any mechanism to legally force them to upgrade right now unless they trigger the rules. Now, there are some new rules coming into play, and I may talk about that briefly, that we will be enforcing in the next year or two.
By 2015, EPA has a new rule on mercury air toxics rule, and by 2015, all coal-fired plants have to comply by that mercury and air toxics rule.
Some of their exemptions do get phased out.
So that will reduce the emissions a whole bunch for all the coal-fired plants. Yes.
Would I be extremely paranoid
Excuse
to
me,
have
can we
people
hear
wear?
from Melissa, and then the gentleman in the back, and then we'll come back to you.
I just wanted to say, you know, I wear a different hat at the agency than my colleagues. You know, they're more on the technical side, and even though at one point I used to do that, I'm looking at things now from a different perspective. So from my perspective, what I hear is that there are several things that the community is asking for. One of those things being, how do we get involved in this process, and how do we make some changes just through making our voice heard? And in my opinion, I think it was mentioned when the meeting first started. Someone said, well, how do we get notified? How do we find out what's going on? And I think that's what we, as an agency, specifically in my office, will take back to truth. We need to work on the process to make sure that the community has every opportunity to be involved in the permitting process. So, and I know you guys have probably all become aware of the public notice being in the paper and different things like that, your opportunity to speak at permit board hearings. Actually, the permit board is the one who finally say this permit will be issued. So, and I'm taking a lot of burden on myself, but I feel that in the role that I play, the need to make sure that you guys are informed falls on me. And so I'm going to step up my game and make sure that when things come up with this particular plan and any other site in this area that you're interested in, I get that information to you, which is no more than an email or a phone call. Thank God for technology. You know, we talk about the Facebook and the Twitter. Okay, we can get information to you quicker now. And so that's one of the things I'm taking back. And the current process that we have, the public notice process, the public participation process, is the opportunity for you all to voice your opinion, have your voice heard, and demand more stringent permit limits. Now, true enough, like Maya and Richard was saying, we're going to go by what our regulations tell us. But when your voice is heard by that permit board has the final say-so as to whether or not that permit is issued. And that's what we work for. So if your voice is heard by the permit board, and the permit board agrees with what you're telling me, or feels the passion that you have for what you are going through, it's a possibility that we would have to go back and do some things different. So there are opportunities, which is all that I'm saying. There are opportunities.
The thing is, when I asked about notification and everything, like, when was the last permit issued to our company?
They were issued, the last air permit was issued according to my records in 2009. Their last water permit was issued in 2008. Their last solid waste permit was issued just this year, August 14, 2003. So, I'm sorry, 2013. So, permits are...
So, but let me ask though, again, we're getting back to notification. Is the only notification of publication in the local newspaper? Because I'd like to know.
We put local newspaper, local library, website, post office. I think we have a couple of things out there. Legally, all we're required to do is the local newspaper. We try to find different ways to get it out there.
But again, Richard, I think that's our concern is, our standards are so minimal. I know legally that's all, but that's a very minimum legal standard.
Okay, that's the law of Mississippi then.
That's what I'm saying. That's a very low legal standard.
We're going way above and beyond the law. That's part of the policy.
Richard, your points, the opportunity.
Permit board is made up by statute, by law, and it's...
We'll get Reverend Span next.
Thank you.
And then Reverend Black, we get him, he's been waiting for. And then we'll come back.
There's a lot of talk going around the table about accountability and who's holding who accountable. But my question is, what kind of accountability are we actually holding people to? Do your department have the authority to fine these individuals and hold them accountable through fines? Because if you do, then some of these low limits that you're talking about, amen, if we was holding these people more accountable through fines, it would clear up a whole lot of things that I hear you talk about. Not enough personnel, not enough money to do things that could be put back into the pot to help hire some of these people and do some of the things. I would like to see the paperwork on how many times Jack Watson been fined for anything.
Yeah.
And how much was it fined?
I have a question.
Very good. I hope y'all got that.
The masks that people wear when they do drywall. They wear these masks that filter out very fine particles from sanding, from doing drywall. What type of masks would be needed to filter out the particles that are emitted from that coal plant? And what level of filtration would need to be present inside those masks?
Do not, because the plant, the workers in the plant have to meet OSHA standards, and if those levels are below those OSHA numbers, then they don't have to wear a mask.
At the real meeting, this wasn't a real meeting, but this to me was just a meeting.
It's real.
So, as we got on this, it sounds like, I'd like to reiterate the way we hear them. The key issues that I heard today was, one is how to communicate better to the public. How do we get more engagement? How do we get it to the right people in the community? It's kind of, I see the main key issue we'll probably talk about at the next meeting. The two is a little bit about the standards, how the standards are set, and how the community might have a chance to influence policy from that standpoint. Basically, kind of how that flows. I guess it would be, typically you talk about civics in government, it would be civics for the environmental world, is the way I see it. How do you involve everybody? And the third one, not just on the applications, but how do we make awareness